All right, good morning. I really enjoy just hearing about your zoo animals, and I like going with you to the zoo. And I was thinking some of those animals, I mean, imagine bringing some of those big animals into your home. They would not make good pets, even by their size. If you were just judging by their size, I'm sure you would, after a while, say this is animals taking up too much room in the home. And some animals, size-wise, would be good pets, but of course, we have to sometimes look beyond size and say, is this a tame animal? Is this animal able to be trained and everything like that. Yeah. So size, but size is one factor that's important. And in the symbols of New York that we were talking about, there were interesting sizes of buildings. And a lot of New York buildings are very tall. So I want you to imagine something. And I think you'll have fun imagining this. Imagine that you came into a lot of money. You happen to have a lot of money, and you're able to buy one of these buildings. So you could either buy the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, or this building, which is actually in Philadelphia, and it's called the PSE&S building. So that's like a symbol of Philadelphia. So you came into a lot of money. You're able to buy this. You're so excited. You're like calling up friends because you want to share with them that this is a great opportunity, and they're so excited for you. They're speaking back to you saying, we're thrilled. Can I move in there with you? Can I rent an office? They're all excited. You're already thinking of decorations, how you're going to decorate the building. Will you change the outside of it in some way, paint it a color? Will you redecorate the offices, make apartments in these buildings? And then you start comparing the buildings. You can only buy one, either the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, or the PSE&S Building in Philadelphia. So you could only buy one. So then you start thinking, all right, I got to start comparing them. Okay. So there's location you want to compare. There's where they're located in New York, even if you decide on the New York buildings. If you don't want to be in New York, you might decide on Philadelphia. But also size might be important to you because you're just talking about size. You might say, I want the tallest building. So let's imagine that you might want the tallest building. Or you could even imagine you might want the shortest building. Or thinking about it, the medium sized building, it's fine, whichever size you want. But you got to know the sizes, right? And sometimes you get a picture like this and you have no idea of the size. Because right now, if you look at the picture of these three choices, does one look taller than the other?
Yes.
Which one looks a little taller to you?
PMs.
The PSENS. I could see why you might think that's taller. Does it look real taller than the others, or just maybe a little bit,
Yeah,
little bit
higher.
higher?
Yes.
What do you think, man? Can you really? The Chrysler kind of looks taller. Is that a guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a guess, and and all we can do is guess from this picture, because they didn't really draw them. They can't draw on a piece of paper how high a building really is. It's impossible to get a paper long enough to show the Empire State Building. I suppose you could, but it wouldn't be very practical, to roll out that paper in your house. So, so we're kind of stuck with this, right? And it's interesting because my parents, when they bought their house, they were given this to judge whether they wanted to get the house, where the house was. So this was the street Vermont Drive, and you can't really tell how long that street is. And this is the plot of land where the house would be built. They couldn't really picture it, okay, until they explained to me that there's something called scale, that there's scale drawings, and by using a scale, you can figure out how large something is. So eventually you're going to be able to figure out how tall these buildings are and make a choice of which building you would want. So scale has a lot of different definitions. There's scale like la 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 la, like in music,
Yes.
right? And I know you're a musician, so I know scales you're probably familiar with, and you like to sing, and you've done music here. Then there's also the scale of how much something weighs,
Like
right?
in science.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Science uses
Yeah, I
scales
love
a lot.
science.
You do love science? That's great. That's great. Math and science really have a nice connection, right? They really help with one another. And then there's another scale of an animal. What animal am I thinking of when you talk about it? Yeah, snakes have scales. Alligators have scales. And what do you think? There's one other animal that swims, let Emil, that swims in the ocean or a lake.
Whale.
Yeah, I don't know if a whale has scales. That's a good question, but I'm just thinking of a fish. Just fish in general can have scales too. So there's a lot of meanings for the word scale, but we're going to use the meaning of how tall something is in this case. How tall, how big. Sometimes it's how wide, but right now we're concentrating on how tall, because you're going to have to make that decision about scale, which building you will buy. And in life, when you get your first home or your apartment, you're going to maybe get a drawing that will be to scale, and you'll want to be able to know how to figure out, should I buy this place? Is it actually big enough for what I want in my life? So that's why scale is important, yeah. Yes?
It's like a theory and a hypothesis.
Well, with the scale, it's a little bit different than a hypothesis, because you'll actually know the inches of how big your room will be. So in that way, it's really good. But if you are looking at a drawing without the scale, yeah, you're just making a hypothesis. So the scale takes you beyond the hypothesis. But that's a good question, and that's a great science word.
Yeah, I learned it from you.
Oh, you're learning a lot. That's wonderful. So let's figure out the scale of these buildings, okay? And when you have something that has scales, they'll give you the little code. So each one of these buildings has its own code on this particular sheet. So it's going to tell you what 1 inch equals, okay? And 1 inch, if you see a little, it almost looks like part of a quotation mark, that's your inch, right? And equals, all know what equal sign is. And in this case, it's going to equal, it's something in feet, So when you see feet, like the first one we're going to do, the Chrysler building, it's 1 inch equals 161 feet. I'm sorry, feet is just one of those little lines, okay? And it may seem harder. Who thinks this might be hard? Okay, I've got good news for you. It's not going to be too bad. It's going to be a little challenging, but not out of our reach. You're going to be able to do it. All we need is a ruler, which I've got. Basically, all we're going to be doing is measuring. We're going to do the first 2 together, first 3 together. So don't go beyond what I'm doing. I'm going to, we call this modeling in teaching. It's not like modeling like a runway model, but it's modeling in teaching where we do the first couple together. So don't race ahead. The third one you're going to be doing on your own, but by the third one, you're going to be like an expert, right?
Yeah.
Because we've already done the first 2 together. So let's take a look at that Chrysler building, and I'm going to get you calculators, which we'll use after we use the ruler. We'll use our trusty calculators. Okay? All right. So the Chrysler building, we're basically going to measure that on the paper and then use the scale code, if you want to call it that, a legend, a code down here to figure it out. So inches, good question. Inches are the ones that there's more space between 1 and 2 and 3. Centimeters, there's only tiny spaces between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to use inches, and we're just going to measure from the bottom of the Chrysler building. Start at 0. 0 is not on the ruler, but you imagine it before you got to 1. So you kind of started on the ground of the Chrysler building. Or if you're going in the other direction, you just started at the spire of the Chrysler building. Anyone get what I got about
What'd you get?
6 and some odd change, right?
I got
Yeah.
6.
6 and the big, we're almost by that big line in the middle of 6 and 7, so let's call it 6.5 or 6.5 for our calculators. 6.5 for our calculators. How did you do? You got that 6.5? Do you see, Emil? Good. You decided to start it up here. See how it landed at the 6.5? 6 and then that 0.5. So let's plug that into our calculator. Or if you want to write it down on the bottom of the sheet so you don't forget. Now that's not our answer. That's not how big the Chrysler building is. That's just part of what we're going to do. So we're going to put 6.5 into our calculators. Times. You got it. We got a times.
1 inch.
Not 1 inch, but what 1 inch is equal to. So you're on the right track. We're going to go 6.5 times 161 feet. Because remember the code was for every inch we do 161. So 6.5 times 161.
Oh, I need my pencil.
And we might get a lot of, oh, you can go get it.
4.65.
Let's see.
4.6.
Yeah, like 104.6.5 did you all get?
4.6.5, yeah.
10. So we can write, that's our answer. We can round up the 6 to 7 if you want. 1047 feet is that building, is the Chrysler. 1,047 feet. So you could put that little one line there, not the quote, but the one line. That's your feet.
Oh,
Some people write FT, that's okay too.
yeah.
Okay? So you guys did that pretty well. And we're just going to do the next one together. And by the third one, like I said, you're experts. You'll be able to do that one on your own. So let's take a look at the Empire State Building. They have a different code, but we got to measure before using that scale code or scale legend. Let's measure that building. Remember, get the 0 mark, which you never see on a ruler, but you know it's below the 1 where the ruler starts.
The 6 or 5.
Let's see. I'm going to do mine.
You want to get closer?
Yeah, you know what? I think, are you getting where, you're getting almost the same. They made the drawing the same there almost. Let's say 6.5. It might not be totally 6.5, but I think for our purposes, in figuring out which is the tallest building, which is the medium, and which is the smallest of these three, I think we can go with another 6.5. Okay? So now we're going to do 6.5 times a different number, because this is a different scale.
226.
So 1 inch is equal to, on this, right, Kendra just said, 226.
1,400.
And I'm going to do that on mine. Times 226. If you have to round a little bit, you get that 0.5 as the first number, you can round up. If you got a 0.4 or less, you can round down. Let's see, 6.5 times 226. What did you get? About 147 or 146.9?
Yes.
Whatever you
That's what she
decide.
got.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could leave it at 146.9 if you want. If you don't want to deal with rounding right now, that's okay.
There's a tiny dots right after like the 9.
Oh, it's after, you're right. I'm sorry, it's not 0.9.
Well, if you want to round it off.
It came to 146.9 exactly, right? I apologize. I thought we were going to get decimals on that. But sometimes you put decimals in and you get, yeah, it's just 1469. Okay? So even though we put a decimal in, we didn't.
It would have been 3, right?
So the last one, you're on your own, so try it on your own. If you need help, we've got Mr. John, we've got Miss Nancy, you've got Mr. Alex.
That looks like 6.5. Miss Nancy.
Does, yes.
It could-
Yeah, it
Could be. Don't rule it out. Maybe they decided to do it that way. They just checked. They might have made them all. Whoever drew these decided to. Yeah,
About 6.5.
yeah. So it's interesting. Whoever drew these decided.
Okay, this is the total.
Okay, if you got your total, put it down, and then we'll just share our totals and see if we all agree. I'm gonna do mine.
I'm done.
Okay. Everyone, how did you do? Anyone need more time? Okay. So let's just see, and remember, if your answer is off, there's no crime, you haven't done anything, we'll just help you because maybe you got it right and we didn't. Or maybe we'll teach you something that you might have had trouble with. So Manny, what was your answer to the PS building?
194.0 was
Okay, and 0 what? Inches, yards, or
feet.
feet? Excellent. It's really important when you say your number to say whether it's in inches or feet. Okay, so you got 494.0. Okay, which you didn't have to do the 0.0. It's fine to put it in, but you could have just said 494 since 0.0 is 0. Yes,
I did
Kendra.
0, but I did 494.
You did. Okay, 494 feet. Excellent, Kendra. Good, good. And what about you, my friend Emil? How did you do? What's your answer?
494.
Excellent. And 494, what unit of measurement? Is it inches, centimeters, yards?
Feet.
Excellent. Feet. So say it again. What's the
494 feet.
for the PS building? Great. Now you can make a decision. Which building would you want? I'm curious. It doesn't always have to be the tallest. Some people are like, that would be too overwhelming for me. No way. I don't want the tallest building. So what would you go with if you had the money?
The PSFS because it's larger.
Ooh, it's larger. What makes you say that it's larger?
This right here,
Oh, okay. Larger in the respect of width.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, but not height. But he's interested in width. Maybe he wants his offices to be wide. So very good. You're going to be a great home hunter and apartment hunter, looking at these scales.
Be perfect for a hotel.
Perfect for a hotel, and guess what? You're on the right track because they made that building into a hotel.
Wow.
So they did, and it was not a hotel originally, and they made it into a hotel. So interesting. What about you, Kendra? Any decisions on what you might purchase if you could? Empire State. Okay. Do you like the idea that it's? Yeah.
A lot of room.
Sure.
And it's popular.
And it is popular, and if you run that observation deck, people like to come up and take the view.
I can see it from over Parker Street.
Oh, right, you can see that.
I saw it yesterday.
Yeah. Good using scale to make your decision. And Emil, what about you?
The Chrysler.
The Chrysler building. Okay, why the Chrysler?
Because the two others are too overwhelming to me.
Too overwhelming. Okay, well, one is overwhelming because it's so tall. Okay, and why is the PSENS building overwhelming? Because remember, it's not that tall, that PSENS building. It's only 494 feet. That picture doesn't tell the story. That's why we need the scale, right? Is it overwhelming because of the width? Because of what Manny liked the width, but do you think the width is just not your style, maybe? Maybe the width, how long it is from here to here, is maybe just not your cup of tea, as they say. So you guys did an excellent job. So the main thing that I want you to take away from this is that when you're looking at plans for something, if someone says, hey, look, I'm going to build you something, or you can buy this, or don't always just go by that picture. Ask that person, is there a scale that goes with this? Is this the actual size? Most of the time, they can't put the actual size on the paper. So you say, what's your key to your scale, you know? Perhaps when you're showing your animals with Miss Karen in any of your projects, you don't have to, but you might decide if you're going to draw a bobcat, a penguin, or a cobra to include some kind of scale for us. An inch equals, you know, find out what the whole animal is from head to tail, and then maybe do a little scale for us as well. It's just another option. So, thank you. Any questions about anything? Okay. One day I might be walking into one of the buildings that you picked, and I might be saying, this is Manny owns this building. He owns the PSNS building. Or Kendra is the head of the Empire State Building, and I knew her when. Or Manny now has the Chrysler Building, and he'll be letting me in for a free tour, I hope. Anyway, great job, you guys.